Welcome to the Heart Centered Life podcast, a podcast that helps you cultivate a life where intellect, emotion, and intuition align. Each week, we bring you tools, resources, or guests to help you find that space where your true happiness resides and encourage you to meet the world's deep hunger from that place. Because we truly believe that when your deep happiness meets the world's deep hunger, miracles happen. I'm your host, Elena Boyd. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Heart Centered Life podcast, where we bring you tools, resources, and guests to help you find your place of deep joy and inspire you to meet the world's deep hunger from that place. Because one of the things we deeply believe in is that when your deep joy meets the world's deep hunger, miracles happen. We are now in the second month of season 2, and season 2 of the podcast is where we explore and reflect on the theme of creativity. If you are new to us, I would like to invite you to visit the earlier episodes of season 1. But if you would like to start with season 2, that's great as well. And I invite you to download the adventure booklet for June and the creativity booklet for July and follow us as we reflect on these themes. And these themes were picked because they promote heart-centered living, in my view, and they will help you come to a more heart-centered space, or to help you come to a more heart-centered space. And as mentioned earlier, our theme for this month is creativity. We have with us an awesome speaker here in the studio, best-selling author Russell Nohelty, to talk to us about his own creative journey. But before that, I wanted to highlight a recent study that came out of Drexel's College of Arts and Sciences Creativity Research Lab, where researchers found that creative insights, that aha moment when you suddenly see a connection or instinctively know the answer to a problem that you've been working on, that aha moment triggers a burst of activity in the brain's reward system, the same system that responds to delicious foods, or even addictive substances, or other basic pleasures. Professor John Kunings, I hope I'm saying his last name correctly, the lead researcher in the study, says that the fact that evolution has linked the generation of new ideas and perspectives to the human brain's reward system may explain the proliferation of creativity and the advancement of science and culture. This may also explain why people who are generally more creative in their thinking and do not allow themselves to be bogged down in the rules and systems that we've been told to follow tend to be generally happier, more productive, and have access to more creative solutions to problems that they face. The link to the research finding, which was published in Neuroimage, is in the show notes, and I encourage you to check it out. Now, onto the wonderful guest on the show today who might be able to share some insight into the research finding. We have Russell Nohelty, who is a USA Today best-selling author of science fiction and fantasy books that are both entertaining and thought-provoking. His books are filled with action, adventure, mystery, and thrills. And Russell describes himself as a writer of fun, fast-paced pop novels and layered, deep philosophical tomes. Russell's great mission in life is to help all creators, but especially writers, build better businesses. And the way he does this is through his podcast, The Complete Creative, which interviews creators, writers, and artists in an attempt to help them build or teach creatives to build better businesses. He's done more than 170 episodes in that podcast, and he's interviewed creators with huge names like Team Powers, Dr. Deborah Holland, Marv Wolfman, Jeff Coyne, and many more. So Russell, I'm so pleased to have you here with us today. Welcome to the Heart Centered Life, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So Russell, let's start by asking you to tell us about the books that you've written, and then about the mission that you have to support creative entrepreneurs.
Sure. So I have been writing since 2006 very heavily.
Mhm.
I've been writing professionally since around 2014 and full time since 2015. And during that time, I've written a whole bunch of books. I've written mystery, science fiction, dystopian, slice of life, sci fi, and a whole lot more. But the thing that I'm most known for is mythological fantasy. So it is combining Greek, Roman, Judeo Christian, Norse, Egyptian, and other philosophy and other mythologies into my universe called the Godsverse. And the big overarching universe is called the Godsverse Chronicles, which currently has 4 books in it. And I am currently working on the 6th book in that universe, with the 5th, 6th, and 7th books slated to come out in 2021.
Oh wow! So this tell us a little bit about this God vs Universe or God vs Chronicles.
Sure. So it's sort of what if all gods? So it started with a book called Katrina Hates the Dead. That book is about a girl who gets sick of living during the apocalypse. She just sets out to hell to kill the devil, and gets embroiled in a battle between heaven and hell. And it was supposed to be one singular graphic novel. And after it was over and I started selling it, people kept asking me questions about the universe. Where would we go next? What would we do? Like how it got that bad,
Mhm.
and sort of all of this stuff. So one of the uh, biggest questions in my life is how we went from polytheism to monotheism, and like trying to come up with my own sort of idea of like how that would happen. And so this is my fantasy thriller series that sort of explains what I believe could have happened, which is basically that all gods are real. When a new habitable world is formed, all the gods kind of come and make sure that it's right from all the pantheons,
Mhm.
and then most of them leave, and they leave one god regent in charge, kind of like a duke. And the god we get stuck with is Bacchus, who's a vain drunk, and he doesn't really know what he's doing. And because he's vain, he sort of tells everybody that he's omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent, which is impossible. But and he forces people to sort of stop worshiping the old gods and worship only him.
Mhm.
And you can sort of see this even when you go to. I just got back from a research trip last year to Italy, and you can literally see the temples once dedicated to Juno and Jupiter
Mhm.
and all of the gods. Sort of now they've been repurposed to be churches,
Mhm.
and so you can literally watch this stuff happen. And I am very fascinated with comparative religion and all of that stuff. So this is the book series is like fast paced fantasy thriller, but that is the underlying mythology behind it, which is sort of like how do we move from polytheism to monotheism.
Oh, that's so interesting. And so when you talk about, all these different ideas, and you obviously have done a lot of research into the different types of religions uh, that we had once. Um, what gave inspiration to the book? Of all things, was it an interest in philosophy, or I know you mentioned comparative religion, and you've woven that into the storyline.
Yeah, all of that sort of came into it. So I think it's the culmination of just all of the stuff that I've been reading for the past 30 years of my life. I'm a lapsed Catholic, so it was, I have my dad went to minor seminary. He was
Uh,
quite religious. My mother was quite religious as well, or is quite religious as well. And so they kind of instilled this tradition in me that didn't make sense,
okay.
and my whole life has kind of been squaring the
uh,
has been trying to circle the square
right.
of or square the circle of like how God could be omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent while still like having all of this bad stuff going on.
Hmm.
And my answer to that is I can square any two of them, but I can't square all three. I just like cannot believe that he is all good, all powerful, and all knowing. He can be all good and all knowing, but not all powerful and all good. Uh, but not all knowing,
Mhm.
all knowing and all powerful, but not all good, or the other
Right.
ones, whatever the other one. I can square any two of them,
Mhm.
um, but I just can't square all three of them together. Like I really prefer, and like I think that there's a lot of validity to what pagans believed and what early Greek, Roman, Egyptian, Hindu, Buddhist were like. There's a bunch of gods, and they all just like
Right.
they all kind of suck. They're all kind of okay. They're like all, but they're all like very human.
Right.
And this idea of like we were created in God's image, but like God created very faulty beings
Mhm.
kind of doesn't work for me. But being created by a bunch of kind of like average
Yeah, would
beings
justify,
who like
right.
just kind of yeah, like
Yeah.
I get that. Like I totally get like how Hera could be like self-serving and like kind of violent and bitter, but also like really nice when she wants to be, or
Mhm.
like Aphrodite or Shiva or like Vishnu or Ra, or like all of
Yeah.
these gods. They kind of like are capricious in nature. Like that's their nature, and that is also our nature. And I think that we have this thing in the Western world where we deify people.
Mhm.
We deify our presidents and our quote unquote great men in history and great women in history as these like holier than thou beings that like have never done anything wrong.
Right.
And I think that that goes sort of to this sort of monotheistic culture where like God is all like, if you're going to be in the image of God, you must be perfect. And I think I would much rather believe that like in order to be a godlike, you have to be trying to be good, but also able to be flawed. And that allows you to have a much different perspective on the universe and the world. And it allows you to be like, well, like the people in power are just humans. They're just like kind of crappy humans who are like trying their best to like put everything together, or are captains of industry, or, Mark Zuckerberg, or whoever it is, you know, if you come at it through this like history of monotheism and like specifically Catholicism and also Christianity, you end up with this idea that like to worship something is to deify it, or to revere something is to deify it, and the only way to deify it is to make that all good, all powerful, and all knowing. And that's a dangerous to put on anybody, but especially dangerous to put on like the people who have power.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really interesting perspective, Russell. I grew up Catholic as well, and I think I'm still a practicing Catholic, but I haven't been for mass and since March. but but it's such an interesting perspective. And when you had mentioned that, a really interesting perspective about how can there be an all powerful and all good, all benevolent, and there was something else. The third characteristic.
All good, all powerful, and all
Yeah,
knowing.
and all knowing. There's no way a god that has those three characteristics would allow for all this bad stuff to happen. When you say bad stuff, do you mean bad as in the embodiment of God itself, or bad as in the bad that's happening in like the Catholic Church? A God that has all this,
I mean things
poverty.
like a six a 6 month old child
Yeah,
dying of malnutrition.
right.
Like
Poverty.
I mean like children who get cataracts, have done nothing wrong and get cataracts and they
Right,
can't get it fixed.
right.
Like things that objectively, like, you could have whatever opinion you have about like who was right or wrong in war,
Yeah,
but I mean there's just some things that like objectively I just can't circle. I just can't like think that
right.
objectively this is not wrong. Like objectively, if you were a good god, you would not like have two hundreds of millions of kids
Right.
dying of like hunger and like getting and like people being children like babies being born with
Hmm.
AIDS. Like I just don't think that's I don't see how an all good God could do that.
Right.
I just like we because we can have all of these circular things about like what is good and what is bad and like what is the where is the line of like what the Catholic Church did that was good and like the like whether it balances out. It's like I don't believe it did, but I just can't believe that like some God would like let a child that was all good, all knowing, and all powerful, let a child be born with AIDS and then die like a year later,
Right.
like with do knowing nothing but suffering.
Right.
I can believe a God who like is trying to do good but is not all powerful, like is trying to be good, is trying to be all powerful, like is
Right.
trying to use their power for good, would allow that because like they would have no like
They
it would be
couldn't.
like evolution,
Right.
right?
Right. They didn't have the power
Right. It's like
maybe to deal with that situation.
right.
Right.
Or maybe they had the power to create something, but then like they didn't have the power to control it once it was created.
Hmm.
You know, all of these things are like I'm willing to give all of these things thought.
Yeah.
But when somebody tells me that just like God works in mysterious ways, I'm like that kid just freaking died of AIDS. He never knew anything but pain in his entire life. Like there's no way, it's just no way that I believe that like
Right.
a God that like is from this Bible, even the Jewish tradition of God, like I believe more because the Jewish tradition of God is like a vengeful,
Right.
spiteful like deity.
Right. Right.
He's like sending plagues and kicking people out of the
Right.
Garden of Eden,
Locusts.
and like he's capricious, right? Like he's doing things that are, but like
Right.
this
Right.
specifically comes across in the Christian tradition where like I don't, I can believe there's one God as long as you can admit that like they can't possibly be the person that you want. And then to be able to take that and like suddenly your preachers and your pope and your like and by extension your captains of industry and your heads of state suddenly like you're bringing all of these other people who like get risen up to be like in the quote unquote image of God are now like in the image of God they are perfect and like I'm sorry like every politician that's ever existed is just a human,
Right.
and by idolizing one god like that is in that way, you tend to then be much easier to idolize all people that are in that vein of like these like great men. You know, we don't teach in school. We don't teach like that George Washington's teeth were made of his slaves' teeth. Like
Yeah.
that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing. But we deny all of that and we instead only like focus on what is good. And
Yeah.
I think that that's a flaw that goes all the way back to like our Protestant and Catholic roots.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whew, this is way off topic,
Yeah.
maybe, but
Well, it's an interesting tangent. I just want last point just to bring it home. Um, Christopher Columbus. We were taught that he was this wonderful guy who came from Europe. And he traveled the world. And brought modernization and brought new technology and all that. But and there are statues of him all over the world. And it wasn't until recently that I knew that of the cruelty that he brought upon the people, in the islands that he visited. He murdered them. His people raped them, and I, um, and entire tribes were obliterated because of his ways. And I think you're right in that we like to tend, and the George Washington example is a great example as well. We tend to venerate people in history, in this perfect light, and we forget that they are only human, and a lot of them have committed atrocities for the things that we venerate them for right now.
absolutely. And for me, that flaw for me, when I think about like where that flaw goes back to, it goes back to this idea of like the Christian God and like how he is
Hmm.
perfect and like
Yeah.
so in the Gods verse Chronicles, I'm very careful to make sure that none of the gods are perfect. Like they can do great and powerful things.
Yep.
They can be benevolent. They can be petty. Like they are just kind of like another species, race of like beings that have all of the capricious nature of humanity. And to me, just making that one switch allows me to now be like, well, if even gods aren't perfect, then like nothing can be perfect. And like we have to just live in this world where there is no perfection. And, you know, we don't worship the people that become like that get risen up and become a governor or become a president or become like even a saint.
Right.
Because like if even our saints cannot be perfect,
No.
then like we can all kind of breathe easy and kind of understand that there's this saying that's sort of we don't need 100 people doing zero waste uh, perfectly. We need 1 million people doing zero waste
Yes.
imperfectly.
Yes.
And the same thing about like climate change and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that like this idea of perfection that we've sort of put upon ourselves
Yeah.
prevents us from doing the work of like examining the fact that like some of the stuff we say is racist, and like the system that put us that like that we've all lived under is racist.
Hmm.
And like yeah, it's done some awesome things also, but like it's built upon the backs of like racism and misogyny and like oppression. And if we can just deal with the fact that like our God isn't perfect, then like our country doesn't have to be perfect. And like we don't have to sweep these things under the rug anymore. We can just admit that like we've done crappy stuff and then work to make it better. Like we can say like if we don't sweep these things under the rug and say like yes, this is the baseline. It sucked for people for 400 years. Now let us actually work to make it better, knowing that we are imperfect beings.
I love it. Love it. Yeah. So that's a really good way of looking at things, especially when you realize that you're not perfect yourself, right? So following, I saw some post on Facebook of and this was following the racial upheaval and all that followed the murder of George Floyd. But I did see some posts on Facebook that I just couldn't believe. They were written by white women who were saying that, oh, we are in this the highly spiritual space, and we're so connected with the universe, and George Floyd is channeling this message through us. Um, and what he's saying is, riots go back, be at peace, go home. Um, and that's a very twisted way of looking at things, in that it obscures reality completely, and you're saying that, oh, there's this, because we have this ability to connect with this huge universe, that this is what we think should be the message. And I think what you're saying is counteracts that idea that people can somehow reach this perfect space where we know exactly what's right. And I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's one of the dangers of creativity. Is one of the
Hmm.
beauties of creativity is that it sort of blossoms from nothingness, right? And you like can make
Right.
anything happen. But with that, you have a responsibility with creativity too. You have a responsibility.
Exactly.
Yeah, you need to wield it appropriately, and you need to wield it in the right channels, and you need to wield it in certain ways. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that wield creativity in a dangerous way. And because
Hmm.
creativity is such an elusive and ephemeral thing, it feels like magic to a lot of people, and it feels like magic even when you're being creative. Often, like even now, it feels like when I'm writing something, it's mostly magic, mostly just like I don't.
Yeah.
My wife always says like, "How can you not know what's going to happen next?" It's like I don't know. Like my subconscious
Mhm.
kind of takes over and like it bubbles up of like what I'm supposed to be writing at that time. Sort of, it comes from an unconscious or subconscious place, and yeah, I think that you have a responsibility to be able to have a safe space to build your creativity, but you also have a responsibility to wield it in a positive direction. There's a reason why authority is so scared of artists, and it's because we can live in every space, and
Yeah.
we can
Yeah.
shine a mirror up to society, and we can hang out with paupers and with princes, and all of these things are true. But there's a responsibility for art that I don't get a chance to talk about a lot, but I do feel that like need to make sure that the thing that I'm wielding is for both the
The
public
greater
good,
good. Yeah.
right, the greater good. And I mean, I think that a lot of those women that you were talking about probably are thinking they're using it for the greater good as well, and that's what they would argue. And that is where we have that is where you have to temper uh, creativity with objective truth. And creativity can go a long way. I mean, it took me all the way to the ends of the universe, like quite literally. The book I'm writing now is literally the end of this, like God's verse universe, and like how it all comes to an end. And
Right.
um, but like it also, there's factual things that make a story richer, and I think we need to get back to remembering that like there are certain things that like are just objective truth exists, and having the structure of objective truth that you have to work within um gives you more creativity, not less. I was listening to Frank Gehry, a
Love that. Yeah.
yeah, Frank Gehry several months ago, he had a master class, and Frank Gehry is an architect. He created like the Guggenheim and the Walt Disney Concert Hall, and like his stuff is very iconic. And he said like what people don't understand is that I deal with the same constraints as every other architect. There's a lot of constraints as an architect. You have to like, there's
Hmm.
building codes
Right.
and fire codes, and
And
there's
right.
and
And
acoustics and
angle. Right. And physics.
right, exactly. So
Right.
there's all these
Yeah.
things,
Science.
and he's
Yeah.
like, but within that structure, I get 10 to 15% that is
Hmm.
mine. That is my creativity. And I try to, and he's like, that is beautiful to me. And he's like, I've talked to other creatives, and like they say the same thing. Like there is a structure to how a book works. There's a structure to how a piece of music works. And you can break all of those structures, and then and create something that may not be a book, or like you just want to explore. But I like the structure because
Yeah.
it allows me to ground the world and say, look, you are going to get a book. It is going to have a beginning, middle, and end. There will be chapter breaks that have cliffhangers. They will be fantasy, so it will have these tropes. It will do certain things that and that by the end, the protagonist will have done X and like saved the day, or like, and I will guide you, and I am a master at doing that. And once you
I
can
love
get
that.
someone to strap in and be like, okay, I know the ride, then they'll believe anything. You can take them anywhere once they trust the structure. If they don't know the structure, then they're spending the whole book or the whole piece being like, wait, what am I looking at? Wait, what happened? Where are we going? Whoa, 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 whoa. Where it's sort
Yeah.
of like being unmoored in time and space. And so by grounding them, you can ground them in structure, and you get actually more freedom if you can do that, to take them in more wild and crazy places.
I love that, Russell. That's so good. That is so good. Um, and what you're saying sounds so much like books that I've been reading on creativity and entrepreneurship, about being able to combine right brain creativity and left brain analysis, and left brain structure. Right? In other words, you cannot be entirely just creative, completely creative and go off in your own way without grounding yourself in the left brain tactics and the left brain strategy and the left brain processes. And I love what you just said.
Well, thank you. And yeah, I mean, I think that so I have this process also for being creative where I feel like I am two people. I am Russell, the business owner, then I am Russell, the creative person. And my job as a business owner is to make sure my employees are are guarded so they can do their best work. So
Mm-hmm.
like my job with any employee
Yeah.
that I have is to handle all the emails and like do all the things and set all the agenda and like make sure that like they know the rules, like the rules of the game, when the deadlines are, to keep things moving on track, and that so that they know by the end of it like the book's going to launch and it's going to be a success. That's for any employee I've ever had, and it's the same for me. My best time is from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And so I'm very guarded of that time to be creative. And I know my job as a business owner is to make sure that at 8:59 Creative Russell is free to come out, and he can stay out until at least 2 and 3, 4, 5 if he's able. Um, and that allows me to do all of the business work that I have to do, but know that like I am my most important employee. I will always be my most important employee, and I need to treat myself in the same way that I treat all of the other people that I employ, and be very protective of the creative time that I have, because it's precious and fleeting.
I love that because a lot of entrepreneurs they become the business. They don't have a separate identity from the business, and then they get entwined and entangled with the entire business, and they forget to treat themselves as an employee of the business. So that they don't get paid, they don't take care of themselves, they don't draw boundaries, and that's pretty dangerous as well because burnout. You know. When you're an entrepreneur and you get burnt out, that kind of puts things to it brings things to a halt. I like that. I like what you just said.
Absolutely.
Hmm. So what do you see in entrepreneurs that we talked a little bit about that, but what is the most pressing challenge about entrepreneurs that you see that inspired the podcast?
So, um, so art school and schools for almost all creativity never deal with the business part of building a career. So they deal a lot with the making something. And I think that the first stage of a career, you really do need to have like a safe space to fail and play and try. Um, but you do need to understand where this is all going as well. So I would meet hundreds of creatives, thousands of creatives, and they would have no idea how to actually grow their business. So they would say, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just posting in my own Facebook group, on my own Facebook page. I'm like, well, are you going out and finding new people? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, there you go. Like, you can't just keep yelling at the same people and like expect your thing to grow by magic. You have to be going out and finding new ways to bring people in. And, you've got to like have a business plan, and you've got to understand what your profit margins are and all of this stuff. And just like people would look at me glazed over and be like, I never learned any of this stuff in school. So my job, I think, is really to talk business, but for creatives. Sort of like, I feel like I'm the translator between business books and like creativity, and and that's really where I shine, is being able to be like, look, it doesn't have to be gross to be like do business or to want to make money or to do any of that stuff. You are a business person and you are a creative, and like those two things must necessitate that you do them at the same time, and not in the same like minute of every day. But like, for instance, when I wake up until 9 a.m., I'm business Russell. That business Russell is the one who like does the research for the books. He puts the outline together. He gets all the stuff working. Business Russell is the one who launches the books and does all of this stuff. Creative Russell is the one who writes the books, and he is a different person. And you need to nurture Creative Russell, but you also need to nourish business Russell, because otherwise you have no protection for Creative Russell. You have no protection for your creative self. And this goes to all entrepreneurship. Like, we all want to just do the things that we love to do. A plumber or an electrician, they love a large portion. Every electrician I've ever met like loves circuit grids and like going through and like making all of the things and like making something light up. Like, that's just a thing. They like working with their hands.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not what most people get to. Most of business is the rest of it. Most of business is answering the emails and scheduling calls and doing your taxes and and dealing with your lawyer and all of that other stuff, getting business licenses and dealing with city hall and all of that stuff takes up 80% of the time, 80%, like 70 to
Yeah.
80% of the time for any entrepreneur. And I got really sick of hearing creatives be like, I just want to write. Because I'd be like, well, the
Right.
AC guy just wants to fix AC units. Like, but that's not the that he doesn't get to. Like, we don't get the option to just like fix AC units or like run electricity or whatever it is. Like, because there's no real,
Yeah.
and outside of advertising and maybe some marketing agencies, there's not really like a job that's writing novels.
Yeah.
There's not
Yeah.
just like you are by definition, by doing the work that we do, an entrepreneur. You must be, you have to be. People ask me in interviews all the time, like, how did you get into entrepreneurship? I'm like, I wanted to be a creative, and like that's just sort of, it's part and parcel. I mean, in a lot of ways, creatives like made entrepreneurship because like that was what a lot of like it goes all the way back to as far back as art was starting to be made. Like there weren't people that were on
Hmm.
staff a lot of times making the art. They were contractors painting the buildings and doing all of those things. So art has been entwined with entrepreneurship since the very beginning. And it's my job, it's my goal to make sure that people understand that it can, like, Michelangelo was an amazing businessman. He was a better businessman than he was a painter. And he was an incredible painter. So those two things can live together. Same thing with
Yeah.
Andy Warhol, Leonardo, all of these like amazing painters that you remember, Picasso. Most of them were just absolutely incredible business people, and they somehow still were able to live both in tangent. And we have sort of broken from that, and now we are
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, well, creativity and business is gross to go together. But it's like, no, it's not. It like is if you can build a business that is like that like it makes the money that you need to make and does the things you need it to do,
Yeah.
you are more safe. Like you can be more risky and experimental with your work.
Right. Right. And that supports the money you bring into the business will then support your creativity, right? It gives you the resources to get different tools, different paints, maybe different canvases. Uh,
Sure, and
yeah.
also it gives you the opportunity to leave your job,
Hmm.
to like do this full time, to not have to worry about your rent, to like know you have money coming in and know you can do your best work. And
Right.
for me, people that don't take that part seriously are doing a huge disservice to their creativity and to their creative lives.
Yeah.
The reason I can make the God's Verse Chronicles and know that it's going to be a success is because like I've launched them and I know that like I can make money on them.
Hmm.
So I can keep making more of them, and I can keep making them like more bonkers or like weirder or like whatever I'm going to do with those books uh because I know that there's an audience there for them. And that I'm going to, that if I need that in 6 months when I need the money from these books to come in, like it will come in.
Yeah.
So all of that comes from like the business part of it, like planning
Hmm.
and scheduling out my life and doing all of those things. It's all so that I can be more creative and protect the employees of my business and not have to worry when payroll comes around, whether it's for me or for anyone that I am employing at the time.
I love it, Russell. What do you think, or what do you see? And you've talked about creativity, you've talked about being able to merge business and creativity together. You've also talked a bit about social impact and the impact of creativity on the larger world. What is your hope for the future in terms of creative and social entrepreneurship?
Well, I hope that now that we have literally been sitting at home for 3 months and the only thing that's keeping us sane is our movies and TV and books and the like, that people stop devaluing art. Because like we're not reading business books right now. Like people aren't sitting down and like doing a lot. Like what they're doing is they're binging through Netflix. They're like finally reading those books that are on their shelf. Like they're trying to escape from like the horrible stuff that's going on out there. And art has been devalued for so long, but
Yeah.
that is what it gives you. It gives you the ability to escape from like the drudgery of your life or the horror of your life, and like get lost in a world that is completely different. And it's incredibly important. Is it as important as like building the Disney concert hall? I don't know. Like, I mean, how many people have gone to the Disney concert hall in the last 3 months compared to how many people have read a book?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot different. And like the Disney concert, what would the Disney concert hall, or what would any concert hall be without the musicians inside of it?
Yeah.
Like it would just be an empty hall. So that looked pretty. So I think that it's been devalued for so long, and I'm not sure that art can like recover in the way that I hope it does. But I just hope that people realize that that person who you make fun of for wanting to be an artist, like they're the ones you fell back on. Like they're the ones that make your clothes. They're the ones that like that do
Yeah.
all those cool graphics in the newspapers. Like they're the ones that make your business cards. They're the ones that make your the cards. They're the ones that make the pops on your table. They're the ones that like make the posters on your wall. Like all of that comes from artists, and your life is full of art. And my hope for the future is that people appreciate that and value it monetarily as it should be valued monetarily.
I love that, Russell. And it's so poignant that you say that at a time when, institutions and uh, the government is facing financial difficulty. The first thing that always gets cut is art and culture. The cutbacks, the very first thing that gets cut out of any program is the artistic component. And I think it's so important for you, or that you mention, or that you emphasize that arts is really an essential component um, of the economy and in culture. And that's such an important point that I think a lot of people forget. Um, what advice would you have for creative entrepreneurs who might be tuning into this particular episode?
It is absolutely possible for you to make a career doing this. It requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of studying of business. It requires a lot of audience building, and it requires just an insane amount of output because your money is really made from like the back catalog of your work, a lot more than the front catalog of what you're currently releasing. So it takes a huge amount of time, but it's absolutely possible. I know just hundreds of people that thousands of people who make their living as a creative that you would never you would never know. You would never know who they are, but they've got their little audience in their little part of the world, and
Mhm.
uh, and they're making a lovely little living for themselves. But it will not work if you just become great at like the work that you do. You must be great at the work you do. For any entrepreneur, you must be great at two things: the thing you do, so creating your art or writing your books or making your fashion, and marketing. You've got to be good at both of those two things to stand a chance. And that goes for the guy who like is a great plumber, but like never puts any marketing work into it, as much as it goes for the great artist. You will not get there just by being amazing at your work. And even if you have like a viral moment, it still will take you understanding how to capitalize on that for you to have sustained success.
So, am I hearing you right in saying that to be successful, we cannot just go on word of mouth and referrals?
Well, I mean, word of mouth and referrals happens over time
Hmm.
based on how big your audience is. So you hope that you do get word of mouth referrals, but you have to be out there doing the marketing and finding the people and getting out in the world and doing the advertising and doing the cross promotions and being on the podcast and all of the stuff. All of that stuff puts little tendrils out in the world, and you've got to find a way to get those tendrils and bring them back. Like a bunch of free courses that when people ask me, like when I'm on shows, I always say like, either go to russellnolte.com and join my mailing list, or, go and get my audience building course. It's completely free at thecompletecreative.com/audience. And that thousands upon thousands of little tendrils that are out there all bring back, some people every once in a while. And, I was for years, I was adding about 10,000 people a month to my mailing list, and it helped me get success. But I had to keep doing it. And a big part of marketing is getting more eyeballs on your stuff, because we live in a society that, does devalue art, and you need to have a lot of people in your audience before you can actually hope to make a living doing it. And, that takes a long time. And word of mouth is great, but it's only going to be a percentage of the people in your audience. So if you wanted to really start exponentially scaling, you need to sort of pour some fire on it and learn how to do marketing more than just like hoping that people are going to start talking about it.
Love it, Russell. Love it. I know you mentioned just now about how people can reach you, but can you just again just tell the audience what's the best way to reach out to you if they want to talk to you?
Sure. So we talked about my novels first. So I'll say if you go to russellnolte.com, you can join my mailing list and get some books for free. You can see all of my books. I highly recommend the Godsverse Chronicles, which is currently 4 books. The first of them is And Death Followed Behind Her. And that's 3 different books about Katrina. And the first book, she sets out to kill the devil, then the Greek gods, then the Titans. Then we bring in a whole bunch of other mythologies as time goes on. If you are a creative yourself, then I recommend going to thecompletecreative.com/audience. It shows you basically everything I've learned how to build an audience from scratch in about 18 minutes. And those are my 2 best resources.
Okay. And of course, that will be in the show notes for the podcast. I just like to give people the opportunity to invite the audience to connect with them. So, Russell, I know we've spent a lot of time together today, and I just want to say thank you. We've gotten so much from you. We've learned so much, and it was such a riveting conversation. So thank you for being here, and we wish you the very best going forward with your upcoming books.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to be here.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Heart-Centered Life podcast. Make sure to visit our website, www.elinaboyd.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show. If you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. Be sure to check out some of our programs on how to cultivate, create, communicate, and inspire others from a heart-centered space. Tune in next week for our next episode, where we will help you find a place of deep happiness so that you can meet the world's deep hunger and watch miracles unfold.